Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I just want to start with thinking about adult learning theory, and part of that is responding to feedback. And last session, we did receive some feedback from all of you, and for today's session, you're going to notice some differences as a result of that feedback. You'll be spending a significant amount of your time in your breakout rooms with your coaches. I am putting a link right now in the chat to today's agenda, participants' agenda, for you all to be able to have access to all of the links. At the top of that agenda, there is a link to the session slides, which was also one of the requests. At the end of the session last time, there was a request to have some more information around hybrid learning. And unfortunately, the new studies for that have not been released yet. So, but I was able to find some new research, or more recent research around blended learning and digital learning. And I put a link at the bottom of the agenda for you for that. But let's get into our content for today. So today's agenda is that we're going to be talking about research and promising practices around turnaround leadership. And then you're going to have some time to talk about promising practices, that particularly the promising practice around leveraging your leadership teams. In the spirit of looking forward, just really thinking about how you can really leverage your leadership teams to support your schools and your students going into next year. So our outcomes for today are to review the research and promising practices for turnaround leadership, identify promising practices you can use over the next few months as well as into next year, and to self-assess your school's leadership team and identify some possible strategies to improve your team. So as was mentioned, this work is based around the 4 domains of rapid school improvement and your current framework that you're looking at in terms of school improvement. That includes turnaround leadership, talent development, instructional transformation, and culture shift. And today's work is around domain number 1, turnaround leadership. So a little bit more around what is a turnaround leader and what does turnaround leadership mean? In the 4 domains, that means that the turnaround leader drives initiatives to facilitate rapid and significant improvement, communicates an urgent need for turnaround to the school, the staff and community. And basically when we talk about that, it's an urgent need for improvement so that all students receive the high quality education they deserve. And just to also say, turnaround is definitely not a term that we're using as much anymore. And the 4 domains is in the process of actually going through a revision, and that term is going to be retired. But a turnaround leader also demonstrates a strong commitment to this work, putting in place policies and structures and the resources and supporting your personnel to improve your school. And you're catalyzing and organizing the work of the staff charged with implementing efforts to improve your school. And it's also based around developing and executing data-informed plans and practices to support all of your students. As we discussed in the last session, there are some companion turnaround leadership competencies around driving for results, influencing for results, problem solving, and showing the confidence to lead. Leaders have a real impact in education, and today you're going to hear a lot about some of those impacts, but a good principal is the single most important determinant of whether a school can attract and retain high quality teachers. And leadership also affects leadership effects are also largest where and when they are needed the most. So this is, critical work. Your work is critical to turning around your schools. So what do we know about turnaround leadership? Well, what we know is based on research, and as you all know, every evidence-based practice is very important as you're thinking about the strategies that you're implementing in your improvement plans for your schools. And I'm sure you are familiar with the ESSA evidence tiers. And when we look at research for turnaround leadership or for transformative leadership, there is really strong evidence around the impacts of leadership. And then at the same time, there's moderate and promising evidence for the actual promising practices for the leadership. And that's because of how some of the research studies have been created. We haven't yet got to the place where we have enough research that is looking at similar things to push that research all the way to the strong evidence level. But today we're going to be sharing what we have been able to pull together from the field. So what we did is reviews of relevant research articles and reports, of the most current research around turnaround leadership, as well as what effective leadership looks like, and identified promising practices that with the strongest research base that we could find. So a lot of this work is going to be based upon, what I'm sharing today is going to be based upon a recent paper that came out in November 2021. We looked at lots and lots of research, and this particular paper was a 20-year analysis of the research of the field around leadership practices done by the Wallace Foundations, how principals affect students in schools. And so I'm going to be sharing with you some of the research findings around turnaround leadership practices and leadership practices impacts on schools. That is very consistent with all of the research review that we did. So one of the first findings to share is just thinking about, with leadership, the shifts in the education policy context. And just over the past 20 years, the shifts that we've had in education policy, we've gone from No Child Left Behind that had a focus on accountability that mostly was measured by just single measures of testing. And now we are working under the ESSA and with more of an emphasis on multiple measures. And there's also a heightened focus on cultural responsiveness and equity. And that is fueled by the demographic shifts in public education. So one of the things that is a major finding of the research is the impact of principals on student achievement.
I'm already on, no worries.
So for the impact of principals on student achievement, looking across multiple studies, they are finding now that principal contributions to student achievement are nearly as large as the average effects of teachers identified in similar studies. And at the same time, those principal effects are larger in scope because they're averaged over all students in a school. So in fact, the importance of school principals may not have been stated strongly enough in prior work, they find that when trying to move the needle on student achievement, and that, go to the next slide. Some of the things that they have noted is that principal's effects on students are mostly indirect, and they come largely through their recruiting and developing and supporting and retention of talented teaching staff and creating conditions for them to deliver strong instruction. The research also now suggests that an investment in improving school leadership has a higher potential return than other K-12 education academic improvement strategies. So by the numbers, some of the ways that they've been able to measure impact on principals is looking at studies of principal effectiveness. So looking at different ratings, the ways that principals are rated. So, so one of the types of research studies is the overall principal effectiveness ratings. And some examples from the research show that principal evaluation ratings are principals with stronger ratings have stronger impact on student achievement. Principals with higher ratings with their staff also have a greater impact on student achievement. The research also shows that schools with principals with a higher effectiveness rating also have overall better attendance rates. And so that's connecting back to our last session, that so we know from the last workshop that improved attendance results impact student outcomes. So now just get into what effective turnaround leaders do. And so from the research, there are some particular principal skills and behaviors that support learning, that 20 years of research have identified as key skills and behaviors to support student learning. The first one is engaging in instructionally focused interactions with teachers. The second is building productive school climates. The third is facilitating collaboration and professional learning communities. And the fourth is managing personnel and resources strategically. So before I go into giving detail about what these look like, we all know that you work in schools, and these are things that you are actively engaged in. So we're going to take a little bit of time for you to go into your groups with your coaches so that you can talk about how you apply these skills and behaviors at your schools. So so you're going to be sent out with your coaches to have a conversation and talk about these different skills and behaviors.
All right, opening breakout rooms now.
Okay, so let's just leave them in there for 15. They're supposed to be back in.
Alicia, do you want to pause the recording?
Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had great generative conversations in your rooms with your coaches. And I just want to give you a moment to share in the chat, especially those of you that didn't have a chance to use the Jamboard, any ideas from your discussions that that you'd like to share with the whole group. So just give a moment for you to chat some reflections from your conversation.
I'm sorry, I missed that part. I just got in.
Oh, sorry. I'm just asking everyone to chat some reflections from their conversation.
Yes, we had some really deep conversations regarding our first one had to deal with the instructional, and let me get back up here again. Okay, dealing with instructionally focused interactions with teachers. So in it, of course, the observations, the informal observations and the structures and the meeting times and the coaching sessions within the schools basically were there. Okay, they're there. But in addition to that, one of our colleagues shared with us that because we're now in the virtual setting, they were actually able to have more consistent interaction and give the teachers support because, you click the button. Do you understand what I'm saying? So they were able to do even more, have more coaching sessions with their staff. Well, the shift to the current, one of our colleagues also is sharing that they are really looking at what's presently happening, and they're looking for the trends. And she also referred to the fact that, like you said earlier, Alicia, even though the research is not there, they're basically looking at the trends that are existing and are being exhibited right now. One of our colleagues is very interested in assessment literacy. She feels very, what she is seeing is that everyone does not have a true understanding of assessment literacy. So that's instructionally, that's what she is focusing on in regards to interacting with her teachers, because as you mentioned earlier, Alicia, it does have an impact on cultural biases. Another one of our colleagues talked a lot about the pass-fail rate that is existing in our high schools right now. So they are focusing on the instructional framework, which is really right on point with all of our focuses for next year, looking at instructional transformation. So that's what basically for the first part. The second part, dealing with managing personnel, it has a lot to do with personnel and resources. It has a lot to do with monies. Do you have the monies? Do you not have the monies? It also has a lot to do with the restrictions that are basically imposed on how to spend the monies. But all in all, our colleagues are looking at, our secondary colleagues are looking at strategies to support our EL learners. We're looking at what's going to happen during this summer. But professional learning is going to transpire this summer in order to get everyone prepared to move forward. Heavy emphasis on social emotional learning. Heavy emphasis on that. So much so that positions, one of our colleagues have created positions to support SEL, the social emotional learning, when the school door opens up. And then also materials, and this is something that I will follow up with my boss on as they meet with the school district in Baltimore City, is that a lot of our students we know that are not necessarily where they need to be in reading, okay, fluently. However, they are most interested in identifying resources auditorily in order to support the students. And I had just read an article this week saying that that is a strategy that's working well for our students in order to get them to get the information to them, and they're reading along with it to get the information to them so they can go ahead and do something with that information. So that was audiobooks and ebooks. And other than that's basically where we ended.
Thank you so much, Felicia.
Yes.
So if there are any other comments that anyone wants to add to the chat, we welcome those. I guess I will create an opening for any report outs from the other two groups as well, if you'd like.
Yeah, I was just going to share just a couple key highlights. So our group talked about building productive climate as well as managing personnel, but under the building productive climate, just Really big in terms of giving a real active voice to students as stakeholders, and valuing their role in the learning process.
Long time no see.
Wait a minute, my
Yeah. And so having a real clear living vision and mission was mentioned by one of the principals, and that all the actions that occur within the building relate back to that vision and mission statement. And then coordination of efforts, right? So coordinating things in a way that both actually supports personnel management, that everybody knows what's occurring and there's not some fractured efforts, were some just highlights of building productive climate.
Thank you.
Again, my group, and I'll be very brief, talked about the facilitating collaboration in professional learning communities. We talked about the frequency, how often these groups or this community met. We talked about the members that made up the community. We also talked about the positions of the people who make up professional learning communities, the responsibilities, and as far as managing personnel and resources strategically. There are times when our principals are given resources that they did not come out of their budget, and that becomes very difficult when you are not paying for that person and the person doesn't always have your vision.
Thank you. Okay. So just to review the research, and there's a lot of parallels with what all of you were talking about. When we think about engaging in instructionally focused interactions with teachers, instructionally focused interactions refer to those forms of engagement with teachers around instruction and instructional practice, that the high leverage instructional activities support and improve teacher classroom instruction, including their observations and evaluations, which was mentioned, and that feedback and coaching, the opportunities, and the establishment of a data-driven instructional program. So I heard aspects of all of those, that assessment literacy and data literacy, the feedback and coaching, and the increased opportunities with the digital learning to be able to interact with teachers. And in building a positive school climate or a productive climate, strong climate's one in which all individuals can spend their time engaging in or supporting effective teaching and learning. So elements of that are present in strong collaboration and engagement with data, and organizational learning, and that culture of continuous improvement and academic optimism, which is that trust and collective efficacy and the academic emphasis. And that's really sort of links to that idea of that coordination of efforts and all of those pieces coming together. Facilitating and collaborating professional learning communities is a key element of productive school climate, leading to that larger collective efficacy within your schools. And so setting the purposes and communicating expectations and that common planning time for collaboration. And I also heard from all of you that idea of thinking about who's leading those and who's in charge and the positions and the roles of doing that work. And once again, as you can see, the data coming up, that data use for improvement, that data literacy thread runs throughout all of these. And once again, that coordination of efforts and resources is providing that time and support for your PLCs or teams or however you call them, because I know not all of us are fans of the PLC language. Just working with teachers to create a shared sense of responsibility for the student learning. And finally, that managing personnel and resources strategically, thinking about those scarce resources and how to prioritize where they're going, including the scheduling and engaging with the community and how, and also thinking about that strategic hiring and placement. And I think those situations with personnel, it's like, how do you bring on board personnel who are assigned to you rather than the ones that you're hiring? So we know that this is not nearly enough time to go deeply into the research. And so one of the things that we want to ask all of you is, which of these promising practices do you want to learn more about to help inform your professional learning going forward? So we're going to put a little poll up for you to ask your preferences, and just give you a couple minutes to respond to that. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more responses coming in. So go ahead and share the results with everyone. So it looks like definitely a majority are interested in more work around facilitating collaboration and professional learning communities. So thank you very much for taking the poll and giving us that information. All right. So as we move forward, just thinking about one particular promising practice that you can have in your schools is leveraging your school leadership team. And so when you think about leveraging your school leadership team, leadership teams can support all of those promising practices from the research that we were just talking about. Instructionally focused interactions with teachers. The leadership team can help build a productive climate, and that's a climate that has a learning focus. They can be leveraged to facilitate collaboration and your professional learning communities, because you can use them as leaders of those teams. And managing personnel and resources strategically, because they are a place where you can help to get that input around some of those resource decisions that you need to make. So attributes of effective leadership teams include having a strong focus on instruction and instructional practice, using data regularly and effectively. They are driven by academic and/or instructional practice goals, develop an effective culture of learning, and use time efficiently and effectively. So one of the tools that we have provided for you today is a rubric called the Results Meeting Rubric. And this is a rubric that has come from a book that it was a research study of 10 years of leadership teams. And what they identified is those key areas around looking at data and using data, developing goals and using your goals, developing strategies for improvement, really focusing on the teamwork in your teams, as well as the different processes that you use to have some kinds of standardized ways of doing the work at your school. So these 5 areas are areas that you can use this rubric to get a window in where is your team right now, and where are possible areas for growth and development for your teams. But where we'd like to start is with yet another poll. And this one is focused on strengths. Which of these 5 areas do you consider to be your leadership team's greatest strength? So. Okay, doesn't look like we have any more responses coming in. There's one more. Okay. And looking at the results, overwhelmingly, teamwork seems to be the greatest strength for your leadership teams. And that's great because that is sort of the foundation for the work, being able to work together as a team. So I'm going to, now we're going to once again go to breakouts with your coaches. And I have had a request from your coaches to have some more concentrated time with you in this breakout session. So, so when you go to this breakout, you're going to be closing out the day from this breakout session with your coaches. So as you go, there are some links that we want to share with you. We want to share the leadership team self-assessment rubric with you for you to support your discussions. And we also need to share the closing survey for the session. And we ask that you please fill out the survey before you're leaving today. So, Natalie, could you also put the session survey?
I will do that. I was going to ask if you would hold on one second before sending everybody, just to make sure that I grab it.
Thank you.
I am copying it.
Wonderful.
So both the handout and the survey link are in there. Thank you.
Wonderful. So thank you. So we are going to now be sending you again to your breakout rooms with your coaches so that you can have some conversation around your leadership teams. And look at the
and thank you, Alicia and Julie. Thank you so much for facilitating professional learning today. And we will look forward to working with you again in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.